Hyperion by Friedrich Hölderlin. Page 27. Hyperion to Bellarmine. Do you know how Plato and his Stella loved each other? So, I loved. So, was I loved. Oh, I was a fortunate lad. It is pleasant when like and like meet in friendship, but it is divine when a great man draws littler men up to him. A gracious word from a valiant heart, a smile under which the searing glory of the spirit hides itself, is little and is much, is like a magical password that conceals death and life in its simple syllable, is like living water that comes welling from the inmost recesses of the mountains, imparting the secret strength of the earth to us in its every crystal drop. But how I hate all the barbarians who imagine that they are wise because there is no more heart left in them, all the self-important monstrosities who slay and desecrate beautiful youth 1,000 times over with their dwarfing, meaningless discipline. God in heaven, this is owls undertaking to drive eaglets from the nest and show them the way to the sun. Forgive me, spirit of my Adamus, for mentioning these creatures before I speak of you. That is all the profit that we gain from experience, to be able to think of nothing excellent without thinking of its abortive opposite. Oh, if only you were ever before me, with all that is akin to you, grieving demigod of whom I fondly think, he whom you, O warrior and champion, enfold in your stillness and strength, he whom you encounter with your love and wisdom, let him either run away or become like you. Meanness and weakness cannot survive beside you. How often you were close to me when you were far from me, and long had been. How often you illumined me with your light, warmed me so that my numbed heart moved again, like the frozen spring when heaven's ray touches it. Oh, how I wish I could flee among the stars with my happiness, that it might not be debased by what was around me. I had grown up like a grapevine without a prop. The wild shoots trailed aimlessly over the ground. You know how many a noble power perishes in us because it is unused? I wandered like a will-o-wisp caught at everything, was caught by everything, but clearly only for a moment. And my unskilled powers wore themselves out for nothing. I felt that everything failed me everywhere, yet I could not find my goal. Such was I when he found me. He had long applied all his patience and his art to his material, the so-called cultivated world. But his material had been, and had remained, stone and wood. Even if under compulsion it outwardly assumed the noble form of man. But that meant nothing to my Adamus. He wanted men, and he had found his art too poor to create them. Once upon a time they had existed, those whom he sought, those whom his art was too poor to create. This he knew for a certainty. Where they had existed he also knew. He resolved to go there and search under the rubble for their genius and thus to occupy his lonely days. He came to Greece. Such he was when I found him. I can still see him walking toward me, looking at me and smiling. I still hear his greeting and his questions. As a man stands before a plant whose peace soothes his struggling spirit, and simple content returns to his soul, so he stood before me. And was I not the echo of his quiet enthusiasm? Did not the melodies of his being repeat themselves in me? What I saw, I became. and what I saw was divine. How ineffectual is the best intentioned diligence of men compared with the power of pure enthusiasm. It does not stop at the surface, does not lay hold of us here or there, needs no time and no means, has no use for command and coercion and persuasion. From all sides, at every level of depth and height, it seizes us instantly. And before we know it is there, before we can ask what is befalling us, it transforms us through and through in all its beauty and bliss. Well for him whom a noble spirit has thus encountered in early youth. Oh, those are golden, unforgettable days, filled with the joys of love and sweet activity. Soon did my Adamas lead me, now into Plutarch's world of heroes, now into a magical land of the Greek gods. Now he quieted my youthful impatience with arithmetic and geometry. Now he climbed among the mountains with me, by day for field flowers and woodland flowers and the wild moss that grows on cliffs, by night, that we might gaze at the sacred stars above us and understand them as men may. There is a precious sense of well-being in us when our inner life thus draws strength from what is its material, differentiates itself, and establishes truer inner relationships, and our mind gradually comes of age to bear arms. But with threefold force did I feel him and myself, when like shades from a time long past, in pride and joy, in rage and grief, we climbed Mount Athos, and from there sailed across to Hellespont, then down to the shores of Rhodes and the mountain gorges of Tannarum, through all the quiet islands, when longing drove us from the coasts inland to the somber part of ancient Peloponnesus, to the lonely banks of the Euphrates. Oh, the valleys, lifeless now, of Elis and Nemea and Olympia. When, leaning against a pillar of the temple of the forgotten Jupiter, with oleander and periwinkle all around us, we gazed into the wild riverbed, and the life of spring and the ever-young sun bade us think that once man was there, and now is gone, that man's glorious nature, if it remains there at all, remains but like a shattered fragment of a temple, or only in memory, like the image of one dead. And there I sat, playing sadly beside him, scraping the moss from a demigod's pedestal, digging a marble hero's shoulder out of the rubble, cutting the brambles and heather from the half-buried architraves, while my Adamas sketched the landscape that embraced the ruin, kindly and comforting, the wheat-covered hillock, the olive trees, the flock of goats hanging from the mountain's cliffs, the forest of elms dropping down from the peaks to the valley, and the lizard played at our feet, and the flies buzzed about us in the silence of noon. Dear Bellarmine, I want to tell you of it all, point by point, like Nestor. I move through the past like a gleaner over the stubble field when the landowner has harvested. He gathers up every straw. And when I stood beside him on the heights of Delos, what a day it was that dawned for me as I climbed the ancient marble steps with him up the granite wall of Cynthus. Here, once the sun god dwelt, amid the divine festivals at which all Greece shone round him like a sky of golden clouds. Here the youth of Hellas plunged into full tides of joy and exultation, as Achilles plunged into Styx, and came forth invincible as the demigod. In the groves, in the temples, their souls awoke and echoed musically in one another. and every youth faithfully guarded the treasure of that enchanting harmony. But why do I speak of this as if we still had even an inkling of those days? Oh, not even a beautiful dream can flourish under the curse that weighs upon us. Over the flowers of our spirit the present blows like a howling north wind, blasting them even in the bud. And yet it was a golden day that wrapped me there on Cynthus. It was still grey dawn when we stood on the summit. Now he rose, the ancient sun god, in his eternal youth, at peace and effortlessly as ever, the immortal Titan soared up with the 1,000 joys that are his, and smiled down on his devastated country, on his temples, his pillars, which fate had thrown down before him like withered rose petals that a child heedlessly tore from the branch as it passed and scattered over the ground. "Be you like him," Adamas cried, and grasped my hand and held it toward the god. And it seemed to me that the winds of morning bore us along with them, in the train of the divine being who now, in all his kindliness and greatness, rose to the summit of the heavens, and all of his strength and all of his spirit filled us. My inmost heart still mourns and rejoices over every word that Adamas spoke to me then, and I cannot understand how I can feel destitute when I often feel as he must then have felt. What is loss when a man finds himself in his own world? In us is all. Why should a man be miserable if a hair falls from his head? Why does he struggle so fiercely for servitude when he could be a god? "You will be lonely, dear child." This too Adamas said to me then. "You will be like the crane whose brothers leave him behind in the harsh time of the year, while they go to seek spring in a far country." And there it is, dear friend. It is this that makes us poor amid all wealth, that we cannot be alone, that so long as we live, love does not perish in us. Give me my Adamas again, and commune with all who are akin to me, that the old beautiful world may be renewed among us, that we may join together and be one in the arms of our divinity, nature. And lo, I shall know nothing of lack. But let no one tell me that fate parts us. It is we ourselves. We delight in flinging ourselves into the night of the unknown, into the cold strangeness of any other world. If we could, we would leave the realm of the sun and rush headlong beyond the comet's track. For man's wild heart, no home is possible. And as the sun's ray shrivels the very plants of earth that it has brought to bloom, so man kills the sweet flowers that flourish in his heart, the joys of kinship and love. I seem to be chiding my Adamas for forsaking me, but I am not. Oh, he meant to come back. A people of rare capacity is said to be hidden somewhere in the depths of Asia. Thither his hope drove him. I went with him as far as Neo. Those were bitter days. I have learned to bear pain, but I have no strength for such a parting. With every moment that brought the last hour nearer, it became more apparent how deeply this man was woven into the very texture of my being. As one dying clings to his fleeing breath, so did my soul cling to him. A few more days we passed at Homer's grave, and Neo became the most sacred of the islands to me. Finally, we tore ourselves away. My heart had struggled until it was exhausted. I was calmer at the last moment. I knelt before him, embraced him for the last time with these arms. "Give me a blessing, my father," I cried softly up to him. And he smiled. There was greatness in his smile, His brow widened in the light of the morning stars. His eye pierced the depths of the heavens. "Guard him for me," he cried, "ye spirits of a better age, and draw him to your immortality, and all ye kindly powers of earth and heaven, be with him." "There is a God in us," he added more quietly, "who guides destiny as if it were a river of water, and all things are his element. Above all else, may he be with you." So we parted. Farewell, my Bellarmine. Hyperion to Bellarmine. Whither could I flee from myself if I had not the sweet days of my youth? Like a shade that finds no rest by Acheron, I return to the forsaken scenes of my life. All things age and are rejuvenated. Why are we accepted from this beautiful circling of nature? Or does it rule us too? I should believe so, were it not for one trait that is in us, the gigantic striving to be all things which, like Etna's Titan, rages up from the depths of our being. And yet, who would not rather feel it within him, like seething oil, than acknowledge that he was born for the whip and the yoke, a raging battle horse or a jade with hanging ears? Which is the nobler? Dear friend, there was a time when my heart too basked under the sun of great hopes, when the joy of immortality pulsed in my every vein, when I roved among beautiful projects as though the half-light of a vast forest, when, happy as the fish in the sea, in my shoreless future, I pressed on, farther, ever farther. How boldly, blessed nature, did the youth leap from thy cradle! How he rejoiced in his untried weapons! His bow was drawn, his arrows rattled in the quiver. And the immortals, the high spirits of antiquity, led him on, and his Adamas was among them. Wherever I went, wherever I stopped, their glorious presences were with me. In my thought, the high deeds of all the ages were mingled together, and as those gigantic forms, the clouds of heaven unite in one exultant storm. So the hundredfold victories of the Olympiads were united in me. So did they become one never-ending victory. Who can abide it? Whom does it not lay low, as a hurricane lays low young woods, when the terrifying splendor of antiquity seizes him, as it seized me, when, as for me, the surroundings are lacking in which he might gain a strengthening self-reliance? Oh, as for me, the greatness of the ancients bowed away my head like a storm, swept the bloom from my face, and often I lay where no eye saw me, weeping 1,000 tears, as a fallen fir tree lies by a stream, and hides its faded crown in the water. How gladly would I have paid with blood for one moment from the life of a great man. But what use was that? No one wanted me. No one. Oh, it is pitiful to see oneself so reduced to nothing. And let him who does not understand this ask no more, but give thanks to nature who made him, like the butterflies for joy. Let him go and never in his lifetime speak again of pain and mischance. I loved my heroes as a fly loves the light. I sought their perilous presence and fled, and sought it again. As a bleeding stag plunges into the stream, so I often plunged into the whirlpool of pleasures, to cool my burning breast, and wash away the raging, glorious dreams of fame and greatness. But what use was that? And when, as often toward midnight, my hot heart drove me down into the garden under the dewy trees, and the lullaby of the fountain, and the sweet air, and the moonlight soothed my thought, and the silver clouds moved in such freedom and peace above me, and from far away the fading voice of the sea came faintly. Oh, then, how graciously did all the great phantoms that it loved play with my heart. Farewell, ye heavenly spirits, I often said and thought, when above me the melody of the dawn's light began softly sounding. Ye glorious dead, farewell! Would that I could follow you. Would that I could cast off all that my century has given me, and make my way into the freer realm of the shades. But I languish on the chain, and snatch with bitter joy the miserly bowl that is offered to my thirst.